Thanks for tuning in to the Diaphragm Dynasty. I'm back with another Behind the Pen edition of my podcast. And today, Behind the Pen, I will have Rodney Jerkins, also known as Dark Child. Now, Dark Child or Rodney Jerkins is one of the most prolific writers in the history of music. Now, I talk mostly about R&B in this podcast, but this is dedicated to music in general when I speak in terms of greatness, not just confined to a genre or to specific subgenre, but to music in general. Because just because you're R&B doesn't mean you're great in contrast to other genres. So I'm speaking in generalities about R&B and their greatness. And Dark Child has written some of the greatest hits for some of the greatest artists. Now you think about a Patti LaBelle, a Brandy, especially Michael Jackson, Jennifer Lopez, Beyonce, Mary J. Blige. His pen has helped create a persona in R&B that was respected from other people and other genres, and made people realize what love is and what people help people deal, realize what hurt was. And that's what great R&B singers or writers in general do. They paint this picture that you might have seen the picture before, and you become familiar with it and can have an emotional appeal to it. You can have some kind of buy-in. So that's the big thing about the writing, is just having that buy-in. And Dark Child definitely had that buy-in on a lot of his hits, and I'll get into some of his hits that he's written in just a few. But well, actually, I'll get into the hits now, because a lot of his hits came from the 90s and early 2000s. But these hits can define a lifetime, especially in the genre. So, Angel in Disguise from Brandy, which is a very powerful song, a song that she's talking about, of course, someone she's in love with and how they were a blessing to her. And this was that strong 90s writing. And this was the early 90s, 98, 99 time period. So when R&B was starting to reinvigorate itself, or starting to transcend into a new age, because after the early 90s and mid 90s, they were on fire. Then it started having a little bit of a down period, but it started picking right back up. And this was towards that time, especially with the song that he wrote for Brandy and Monica called The Boy Is Mine, which everyone perceived as a beef between them, between the two artists. Very powerful artists in the 90s. And I did a segment before on Brandy versus Monica, and a lot of people were upset that I had Monica as a better vocalist than Brandy, but I still believe that um, Monica has a very underrated voice, because she's not out there like Brandy was, and she didn't have the TV shows and the movies and things like that. So she wasn't recognized as much as Brandy was. So a lot of people are more familiar with her voice, but nevertheless, a great song from Dark Child, writing This Boy Is Mine. It was a big hit in the late 90s, and it definitely catapulted their careers and gave them a great moment in music. Destiny's Child, Cater to You, is another great song that he written for them. Destiny's Child, of course, was on fire at pretty much all of their careers, especially during this time period. That Cater to You was used by a lot of women to highlight and celebrate their men, and to just appreciate the man, and just not have those songs that were downgrading to men and just talk about what a man did wrong, but talked about what a man did right, coming home from work, being able to, you know, be, you know, be appreciative of what they had, instead of just always talking about the downside. So this was a very important song for that appreciation and acknowledgement of what men do every day. Tony Braxton's, speaking of songs that downgraded man, Tony Braxton's He Wasn't Man Enough for Me, which was another woman anthem that was kind of, talking about what a man didn't do right and all of the bad things that sometimes we as men can do. That definitely was a time period where they were parading that song around, and you could hear that song blasting out of people's cars, and you knew what time they were on and what they were going through at that time. Uh, Mary J. Blige's "I Can Love You." Now, this is one of the best songs that Mary J. Blige put out. I actually just listened to this song probably last week. This song also features Lil Kim, which I'm pretty sure he didn't write that part, but The "I Can Love You" chorus is definitely a classic, classic song from Mary J. Blige. Anytime you can write for Mary J. Blige, it's an honor and a privilege. So I'm pretty sure that's one of the songs that he cherishes the most from his songwriting credits and collection. It's not right, but it's okay. Talking about legendary Whitney Houston, one of her classic songs. She has so many to name. I'll be doing a segment with her and Mariah Carey pretty soon, talking about that. But yeah, this is another big song. But the most recent song that he had to date that I can think of that's classic in its entirety and establish a career for someone is Brandy's brother, also known as Ray J. Now, this is Ray J's biggest hit, One Wish. This song, you know, is undeniably his greatest song ever that put out. He's put out some great music under the radar, especially with that Radiation album. That's one of my favorite albums. From him, I'll definitely have to do a segment on that pretty soon because I like that album and a lot of songwriting on there was great. He might not have the strongest voice, but he had some of the best writers. Having access, of course, to his sister Brandy, she has some of the top songwriters, so a lot of them probably, helped on the strength of her. But nevertheless, classic song, One Wish. If you haven't heard the song, definitely check it out. It's definitely strong writing on there. But Dark Child definitely wrote a great hit for that one. Destiny's Child, Say My Name, one of the earlier hits that he contributed to. Definitely a classic song that you have to check out. Top of the World, Brandy. He did a lot of collaborations with Brandy, but Top of the World featuring Mace was probably a top 5 hit for Brandy, especially on the crossover tip because it had hip hop appeal to it. And it was just not about the singing, but it was just a vibe, a song that still can play today and still can go today. So and then another big one, Poppy song that he wrote, is "If You Had My Love" with Jennifer Lopez, who we know Drake sampled it later on for Teenage Fever. Um, "If I Had My Love" is definitely one of my top 5 songs for Jennifer Lopez. So a lot of songs that he's written for other people, these songs were probably in my top 5 for these artists just because of his greatness and his writing ability. And he's a producer as well, but we're just talking about on the writing tip. But um it's just great for him to have these contributions in a time where Raphael Sadiq existed, Babyface, R. Kelly, all of these great songwriters existed, and he still held his own in a time period where it was the most competitive for songwriting. But as always, thanks for tuning in to the Diaphragm Dynasty. Until next time, I'll see you next time.